Hello everyone, this is Dr. Nisha Nujumudeen. The topic of discussion for the day is what is demand pull inflation and cost push inflation in simple terms. So we were discussing in the previous videos as to what are the different types of inflation based on speed, based on reasons and causes. So based on speed, in the previous videos we have completely covered it. Now based on reasons or causes, inflation can be categorized as demand pull and cost push in simple terms. So now, because of one particular reason, when there is a price rise, it is categorized into different types. Along with demand pull and cost push inflation, there is another category of inflation called as built-in inflation. So let's quickly have a look into what are these three topics in simple terms. Having said that, in simple terms, demand pull inflation means when there is a price rise or inflation in the economy, and that is only because of increase in total or aggregate demand. Total means what? Aggregate. Okay. Because of increase in total or aggregate demand in the economy from the consumers. That type of inflation is called as what? Demand pull inflation in simple term. Now, too much of people are having demand in the economy. Why? Because they have income. They are PPP. What is that? Purchasing power parity or capacity to purchase commodities high because of increase in money supply and income. Automatically what happens? Their total or aggregate demand increases. And this will give rise to what? A slow and gradual price rise called as demand pull inflation in simple term. Demand pull inflation occurs from the consumer point of view. So it is a consumer or demand sided inflation. When too much of people demand a commodity, automatically what happens? The price of the commodity also increases because people are demanding that particular commodity. So now because of this, when price rise or inflation takes place in the economy, it is called as what? Demand pull inflation in simple term. Now, having said that, what is cost push inflation? If demand is from the point of view of consumers, cost is from the point of view of the producers or suppliers. Now, cost push inflation is also called as what? Supply-sided inflation. In simple terms, when there is a rise in the price of factors of production. What are the factors of production? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneur, right? So now all these factors of production, what do they receive? They receive factor income. For example, for using a land as a factor of production, the factor income land receive is what? Rent. When somebody is working, when a labor is working, the factor income is what? Wages or salary. Here capital means what? Capital means interest. Capital receives factor income in the form of interest. And with land, labor, capital, when the entrepreneur or the entrepreneur does the business, automatically he or she ends up getting profit or loss. Let us keep it profit. Having said that, when there is an increase or a rise in the prices of factors of production, for example, rent of the land has increased, wages have increased, price of raw materials have increased, automatically if I am a producer who is producing a leather jacket, now my price of raw material have increased and every day I was paying 100 rupees to my laborers. Now I am paying 120 rupees to my laborers, which means wages have also increased. You tell me what I will do as a producer who is producing a leather jacket. If the real price of leather jacket is 500 rupees, I will push it as 550 rupees, which means that whatever rise in prices I incurred in my cost of production, for example, increase in price of raw materials, increase in the wages, salaries, etc. of people, I will start pushing that burden in the final price of my commodity. And if really the price of leather jacket is 500 rupees also, I will make it 550 rupees because that is my profit, right? So now because of this, automatically what is happening? The price of the commodity is increasing. This is called as cost push inflation in simple term. And cost push inflation comes from whom? Comes from the suppliers or the producers who's producing a commodity. That is why it is called as what? Supply-sided inflation. And now, having said that, back to demand pull inflation. So now, when the total or the aggregate demand is exceeding what? Exceeding the aggregate supply, or when the aggregate demand is greater than the aggregate supply. In simple terms, total demand exceeds total supply. It is what? Demand pull inflation. What about cost push? It is the opposite. When the aggregate or total supply, when that is greater compared to what? The demand, automatically the price also increases. That is called as what? Cost push inflation. Now, why do you think there should be a demand pull inflation in the economy? What could be the reasons? Why is there so much of demand in the economy? Point number one, rapid rise of population. When too much of people are there in a country, for example, India is the most populous country in the entire world. We all know that, right? Everybody has what? Their needs, desires, wants, demand, etc. If production is not happening to the required expected level, automatically what happens? Demand is there, supply is less. Automatically prices will shoot up, right? So now, having said that, one of the important factors leading to demand pull inflation is rapid rise of population. When there is too much of population, demand increases. When demand increases, what happens? Automatically, price rise also happens. What price rise? Demand pull inflation. Next is black market. Black market means black money. Okay. Too much of unaccountable or black market money is coming up. Automatically, what happens? Money supply in the economy increases. When money supply increases, what happens? The purchasing power parity or PPP, the capacity of people increases. For what? For buying the commodity. Their aggregate demand or total demand increases. Automatically, price rise happens. What price rise? Demand pull price rise or demand pull inflation takes place. So now this black market in economics is called as what? Parallel economy. Parallel economy means black economy, where all the black market dealings and transactions take place. That is also a reason for what? Demand pull inflation. The next reason is deficit financing. What is deficit financing? Deficit means gap. So now when there is a gap in the economy, that is when the public revenue that the government receives via tax and non-tax sources, direct tax, indirect tax, for example, from income tax, from GST, it is very less. Or let's say non-tax sources like what? Fees, fines, penalty, they are non-tax revenue. That is also not sufficient. So now the revenue the government gets via taxation is very less. They are unable to meet what? The government or the public expenditure activity from that particular government revenue through taxation. Then a situation of gap occurs. That gap is called as fiscal deficit. What is it? Fiscal deficit. So now, fiscal deficit is what? Public revenue minus public expenditure. PR minus P, which means that when the public revenue falls short of public expenditure, it is called as fiscal deficit. That is, for example, the government received 400 crores via taxation. Direct and indirect taxes, take a revenue. But the government requires 600 crore for what? For carrying forward the public or the government expenditure activity, like investing in education, healthcare sector, infrastructure sector, etc. What is the gap? The gap is 200 crore. They need extra 200 crore to carry forward what? The expenditure activity. But the taxation revenue is very, very less. What will the government do? They'll resort to borrowings, either from within the country called as internal borrowing or from outside the country called as external borrowing, right? So what is fiscal deficit? Public revenue minus public expenditure. When this situation occurs, what the government will do? They'll resort or start borrowing. That is called as fiscal deficit in the most simplified manner. Having said that, there is a limit for what? Borrowing. The government tells every year in the union budget that more than 4%, more than 5%, the government cannot borrow one whole year. from within or outside the country. But you think of India's condition. India's expenditure is always high. So this fiscal deficit of 4 or 5% is not sufficient for us to carry forward our expenditure activity. So when there is no other way, when a situation of no money supply happens, automatically to balance the situation, when there is no option of borrowing also, because how much you can borrow, there is a limit as well, right? Called as fiscal deficit. So what will the government do? They'll start resorting to printing of new currencies. That printing of new currencies to finance the gap or situation is called as what? Deficit financing in simple term. To make you understand what is deficit financing only, I told you what is fiscal deficit. It is a flow of concept. So the keyword deficit financing is printing of new currencies in order to what? Inject money supply into the economy. So slowly and gradually people will have money. Having said that, demand pull inflation, one of the factors what? One of the factors or reasons for demand pull inflation is deficit financing. Because of this printing of new currencies, automatically more money supply gets injected into the economy. The purchasing power parity of the people increases. Automatically what happens? Aggregate or total demand increases. Leading to what? Leading to price rise. Called as what inflation? Demand pull inflation. Now, the next point is mounting. Mounting means what? Increase in the government expenditure. Again, via various schemes, policies, etc. When money is injected in the economy, automatically PPP increases. Total demand increases. Leading to what? Demand pull inflation. For example, COVID-19 pandemic. What did the government of India do? They came up with Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, the 20 lakh crore economic stimulus package. What did they do? Through various schemes, right from PM Samnadi scheme, the street vendor scheme, to the MSME, to education, to banking sector. So many schemes were brought in. Money was slowly and gradually injected into the economy. Why? In order to save the economy in such a kind of situation. But what happened? Over the passage of time, this money supply slowly and gradually led to what? Increase in the PPP, purchasing power parity, in the hands of the general public. Leading to what? Leading to aggregate total demand, creating an inflation called as demand pull inflation in simple term. That's all. This is what you should learn with regard to what? Demand pull inflation. Having said that, another reason for demand pull inflation is, or another factor is, reduction in taxes. When your indirect tax reduces, for example, GST is reducing. GST is what? Directly associated with the price of the final product. Automatically, the price of the final products or services decreases. So you are able to buy commodities at what? A cheaper rate. Automatically what happens? Too much demand increases. When too much demand increases, automatically what happens? Demand pull inflation occurs. That is also another thing. The next reason for demand pull inflation is lower rate of savings by household. See, somebody is having 50,000 as their income. Okay. Now, out of 50,000, a person can spend 20,000 and save 30,000. Some people will spend 30,000 and save only 20,000. Whereas some other people will spend 40,000 and save only 10%. 10,000 is their choice. Now, when the rate of saving is less, what is the meaning of that? When the rate of saving is less by the individuals or the households, means remaining money they are spending. What is meaning of that? Their total or aggregate demand is increasing. Automatically what happens? Price rise takes place because of too much of demand. People have money with them. And that is another reason for what? Another reason or factor causing demand pull inflation. Is it clear? Now, the next important point is this demand pull inflation. Another factor is it leads to something called as increase in disposable income. In the national income video, I have taught you this. What is personal income? The income available with the individuals from all the sources, right? What is personal disposable income? Disposable means the income that is available in your hand, right? So now, having said that, when there is a demand pull inflation, automatically what happens? The disposable income, the amount of money that is remaining in the hands of individuals to spend increases. automatically their purchasing power parity increases. Demand increases. Leading to what? Demand pull inflation. You have to connect this disposable income with the demand pull inflation. Is it clear? So this is what you should know with regard to demand pull inflation in simple term. Having said that, what is the next one? Cost push inflation. As already I told you, it is supply-sided inflation or supply shock inflation. Now, what are the factors that is causing cost push inflation? One of the factors or reasons causing cost push inflation is taxation. When the taxes increase, in demand pull we saw what? Reduction in taxes. Whereas in cost push, when the taxes like GST or all increase, what happens? Automatically, the final value of the products also increases. The final price of the product also increases. Leading to what? Leading to supply side or cost push inflation. Another reason causing cost push inflation is hoarding. What is hoarding? Hoarding means stocking or piling up of commodities. Okay. When there is hoarding or administered prices, that is also a reason for cost push inflation. Sometimes, even though there is production of one particular commodity, for example, there is sufficient production of tomato, but just to increase the price of tomatoes, producers or suppliers will start showing artificial scarcity. What is scarcity? Limitation. So it is an essential commodity, right? When they start showing artificial scarcity, automatically what happens? Demand is still there. Slowly and gradually, prices will increase. So this is also one of the reasons or factors affecting what? Cost push inflation. Is it clear? Now, having said that, this cost push inflation can be categorized into different categories. Before that, one more reason leading to cost push inflation is fluctuations of oil price internationally. In our country, India, we import what? All this oil, crude oil, coal, petrol, diesel products and all, right? So when there is a fluctuation or an increase of these prices internationally, definitely when we import them to our country, India, what happens? Prices shoot up. That is also a reason for cost push inflation. That is causing cost push inflation. Now, having said that, this cost push inflation can be categorized into three types. Wage push inflation, raw material push inflation, and what is the third one? Profit push inflation. Now, this is a very important topic, wage push inflation. For the UPSC Prelims examination also, wage price spiral or inflation indexed wages. These are all different topics. Is it clear? So now, having said that, what is wage push inflation? Wage push inflation means, for example, okay, I am a producer or I am an employer. Now, when I am producing a cotton sari, suddenly my employee, the laborer, they are saying that we want an increase in wages because of inflation in the economy. The living standard or the cost of living is too expensive because of price rise or inflation. Now, the total cost of cotton sari, or let's say the total cost of any food grains which I am producing, let's say for example it is 100 rupees per kg. Okay. Now, when my labor or when my employee is demanding higher wages, per day I was paying him or her 300 rupees. Now they are saying that because of inflation in the economy, we need higher wages. Okay, I said done. I will increase your wages from 300 to 350 per day. No problem. Now what I will do, I am producing a cotton sari or I am producing some food grain. Now if it is rupees 100 per product or per kg, what I will do is, I will make it 150. Why? Because there is a rise in the input cost by me as a producer or by me as an employer. Because when I'm increasing the wages of my employees, automatically what I will do as a producer, I will try to push the burden of my increased cost in the final price of the product. Automatically what happens? Prices shoot up. Right? That is called as wage push inflation in simple term. Now, wages have increased. Automatically what happens? Why was wages increased? Wages or salaries were increased because of high level of inflation in the economy. To meet the living standard of the population only, wages were increased. But what is the point of wage increase? After some time, automatically price of the commodity also increases. These laborers or employees only go out in the market, right? They go out in the market and they try to get what? They try to get increased. They try to get what? They try to buy the same commodity. No matter the wages increased also, these people, when they go into the market to buy the product, automatically they get the same product at a higher price. So what is the point of increase in wages? Again, they are spending higher price to buy the same commodity. So they are in a trap or they are in a cycle. Initially wage increase, again price increase, again wage increase, again price increase. It is like a cycle. So that is why wage push inflation is also called as what? Wage price inflation. It is also called as inflation indexed wages. So these are the different terminologies that you have to keep in mind. Is it clear? It's like a cycle. And when can you see wage push inflation? Wage push inflation is basically seen during higher periods of growth, because if you see during higher periods of growth, what happens is that this cost of living becomes very difficult. For that only wages or salaries are increased. But again, price rise or inflation becomes too much. Automatically what happens? Automatically cost of living is not reduced. Still it is more higher. Having said that, this wage push inflation is also called as wage price spiral. What is spiral? See, your notebooks, have you seen the spiral binding? It is continuous or circular, right? So, just to show that increase in wage leads to increase in inflation, again back to increase in wage, it's like a circle. So, that is why wage push inflation is called as what? Wage price spiral also. These are just different terminologies. Please keep in mind. Is it clear, all of you? Having said that, the next type is raw material push inflation. This is a very serious type of inflation. Actually, cost push inflation is called as what? Supply shock inflation. In many textbooks, they give it like that. But the real supply shock inflation is raw material push inflation. When there is a rise in the price of raw materials, for example, to produce a cotton sari, cotton is what? Raw material. To produce a silk sari, silk is the raw material. To produce a leather jacket, leather is the raw material. When the price of these increases, what happens? Automatically, the price of the final product also increases. Producers will push the burden to what? The price of the final product. That is called as raw material push inflation in simple term. This is the real supply shock inflation. Why? Because to produce any commodity, what is a basic thing? Raw material. Even though we have labors also, even though we have land also, we have money also, without raw material, can you produce? No, that is a basic thing. If the price of the foundation or the basic thing increases, automatically, compulsorily, the price of the final product also increases. Is it clear? Now, having said that, the third one is profit push inflation. Now, there are some firms or entrepreneurs. What they do is, if they want to increase the profit margins, they will artificially show scarcity of commodity. They will say that there is no supply of commodity. Why? So that demand keeps on increasing. Slowly and gradually, they'll be able to increase what? The price of the commodity. So now, in order to increase the profit margins, the producers do this type of techniques or tactics. This is called as profit push inflation in simple term. And now this is not popular among every commodities or every market. There are different types of market called as monopolistic competition. What is monopolistic competition? Monopolistic market competition means it is a kind of market where there are large number of buyers and sellers for the commodity. For example, there are different category of soaps, right? Lux is there, Hammam is there, Medmix is there, Sindol is there, Santoor is there, Vival is there, Dove is there. So for example, if you take Ayurvedic soaps, Ayur, Medmix, Hammam, all these comes under Ayurvedic category, right? So now, if you cannot buy Medmix also, you can buy Hammam. So the sellers are also more, buyers are also more, and more or less price range is matchable. That is called as monopolistic market or monopolistic competition. Now, there is something called as monopoly market, oligopoly market, and duopoly market. So now, monopolistic, I told you, what is it? Large number of buyers and sellers. And you can easily substitute one commodity for another. If not Hama, you can go with Medimic soap also. Now, monopoly means what? Single man. Similarly, monopoly market is a kind of market situation where there is only single seller for the commodity, but huge buyers for the commodity. What is oligopoly? Oligopoly refers to a market situation where there is large number of buyers for the commodity. At the same time, only few sellers. What is duopoly? Duopoly refers to a condition where there is two sellers for a commodity and large number of buyers for the commodity. Now, those markets where there are single, two or few sellers, like what? Like monopoly, oligopoly, duopoly market. In such kind of market situation only, profit push inflation is possible because less number of sellers. So they will arrive at a conclusion. They can decide what? The artificial scarcity of the commodity. And slowly and gradually, prices can be increased. If they want to increase the profit, they follow this particular perspective. So only in these type of markets, such kind of profit push inflation is possible. Is it clear? I hope the different categories of cost push inflation is crystal clear to you people. Having said that, the last type of inflation based on reasons or causes is built-in inflation. Now, built-in means what? Something that is inbuilt, right? Now, this is a concept connected to cost push inflation in the sense that built-in inflation means initially wages are increased because people find it difficult to meet their living standards. The cost of living becomes more high due to inflation. So wages are increased. Then what happens? Then price is also increased. Again, wages also increased. It is a situation of what? Wage push inflation. Having said that, built-in inflation means in order to meet the increased or the higher cost of living or living standards, wages will be increased. But that increase in the living standard has a huge impact in the consumer or in the society as a whole. That situation is called as built-in inflation in simple terms. This is also one particular category or type of what? Inflation. It actually comes under cost push inflation, but we show a separate categorization. So this is what you should know with regard to demand pull and cost push inflation, the concept, the applications and the subdivisions as a whole. I hope it is crystal clear for all of you in the most simplified manner. Stay tuned for more such videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the video and also to put forward your valuable feedbacks in the comment box. Thank you and Jai Hind.